All right, and we are back with our first conversation for this morning, and it is all about the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And they are, and well, let me introduce our guest first. We have in with us Mr. Luis Ugarte, and he's a counselor at the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as Mr. Joshua Pott, who is a chief policy analyst at the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We got those right?
You got that right.
Spot on.
That's
Perfect.
Right.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I know you guys are all about accuracy and data in your information, so I had to make sure I come good. I
Yeah.
get it right, okay?
Well, I'm glad that that's what we're known for.
Yes,
Yeah,
I mean,
glad
in part,
Always a
that's
good thing.
exactly what you're known for. So we want to start the conversation on price control because we've seen a release from BCCI speaking about your concerns where price control is concerned, particularly the moves that are afoot to implement regulations to see the price control list expanded. Now, I mean, the first question that many would have in mind is why would the BCCI have any sort of pushback to such a move when in the context of today's economy, it seems as if it would be beneficial to the man on the ground.
Right, right, and I think that's a perfect place to start, Paul, because the issue is that we recognize, just as well as the government recognizes, that inflation is a serious issue.
Yeah.
We've been experiencing years of high inflation, especially when it comes to food items, relative to the years before, especially before pre-pandemic, before the outbreak of war in Ukraine. And just like the government, we recognize that something has to be done.
Right.
And we understand where the government is coming from, in the sense that people are essentially looking to them for solutions, especially vulnerable households who are being mostly impacted by inflation. And the price control proposal that's coming out of the government is a proposed solution to it. What we're saying is that we recognize that inflation is a problem, but we are not agreeing to the tool that is being proposed to combat inflation. Not because we don't want relief to go to the vulnerable households, but because we don't think that the tool will even benefit the vulnerable households who need help the most and could actually make longer-term inflation a bit worse.
I just want to pause there by asking, the tool that you mentioned, could you expand on that?
Yeah.
Well, that's basically the price control system. Price controls globally are used as a tool to essentially control prices on certain goods, and it could come either in the form of price floors or more commonly price ceilings. And the body of economic literature, through experience, especially amongst developing economies, is that price controls are inefficient. They don't work. As a matter of fact, they might even benefit wealthier households than they do the poorer households. In its place, what is more effective and what we should be considering a lot more are targeted assistance. We can identify who are the vulnerable households in this country. We're a population of less than 500,000. We should be able to identify who the vulnerable households are, the lower income households are, and target assistance to them. So in our release, we've said that we don't believe price controls will work to combat inflation, and this is consistent with the economic literature that's out there. Instead, we want to work with the government a lot more to see how we can tailor targeted assistance programs so that people can actually benefit from these
So
initiatives.
what are examples, or is there an example of a way or a reason why or how price control doesn't work, and it's in some cases benefits the wealthier rather than the most needy? And I ask that because in our understanding, if you control the price, if you place certain controls on the price of a good, it prevents the seller, whether that be the wholesaler or the retailer, it prevents them from adding prices to, or putting on a price tagging a price on a good that is unaffordable, a price that we can't afford. So that in my mind is what price control does. How does that not benefit, in some cases, the
Lower
the
income.
lower
Right.
income?
Again, another excellent question, and these are the conversations that we tend to have when explaining our position. Basically, because we import a large amount of the goods that we consume, especially the goods on the shelves, when you go to the supermarkets, a large percentage of that are imported goods. Retailers don't have control necessarily over the landed costs. So let's say in the case of a jar of peanut butter, if the manufacturer is able to produce that jar of peanut butter for 1 month at $2 per unit, but due to economic factors happening in the country of origin, the manufacturer has to tell the retailer and the wholesaler, listen, next month I'm not able to sell this peanut butter for you for $2. I'll have to sell it to you for $4 per unit. The retailer can't necessarily do anything about that. The wholesaler and the retailer are getting that product at a landed cost higher than what they previously got it for, and that's really what's been driving inflation a lot. Because we import a lot of the goods that we consume, especially the goods on the shelf.
So there we're talking about a loss to retailers
And wholesalers.
and wholesalers.
Well, I think those are more of the questions that we don't have answers to as yet. And that's one of the issues that the chamber has been raising, that well, for once, we were not a part of these conversations when they started. And secondly, that we are not being given whatever studies were done or how these percentages were arrived at, how the list came about, how it is going to be enforced. So those are the questions that we have, that we are still waiting on some answers.
But to the same question that you posed, both of you posed, and sticking with the same analogy, the way that the price control system is currently set up in the proposal is that it caps the margin at a certain percentage.
Yeah.
The markup.
The markup, at 15% on the
15.
retail.
Okay.
So sticking with the same analogy, if the wholesaler and the retailer is getting this product at a higher price, because of the overhead and all of the costs associated with doing business, you're basically forced to increase the price on the shelf. So the price control cap at the 15% won't necessarily stop prices from going up, because the landed costs will still be increasing.
So, okay, I just want to summarize where we're at so far. So the government's intervention to try to take control or address inflation and price gouging, the high cost of goods, is to expand its control on these goods and, of course, have a markup of 15 and 20% on these goods. Your response is that you guys were not consulted in this process, and also basically that would not even provide a solution, because these imported goods, these retailers and wholesalers have no control when if the price is raised and they have to pay for it at that price, they would have to take it up, even with this act, correct?
Essentially.
Okay.
But it's not to say that price gouging doesn't exist in small pockets of Belize. But it's difficult to identify. It's even difficult for people who understand business to know, well, if this business that is located in a rural village that has to spend so much money on transporting goods from the local urban center to this rural village, if those costs don't justify why the final cost in that village shop is significantly higher than what you would pay if you would buy it in Belize City or in an urban center.
So the Minister of Food Security, Jose Abelardo Mai, responded. He was the first person that responded to your press release, saying that they were not able to consult everyone, being yourselves, the commerce and industry. And they also said that they included in the consultation retailers and wholesalers. So he made the suggestion that maybe the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry would have to expand its base. my question is, what does that mean, or what did you guys understand that to mean?
If I may, and then
Go ahead,
Joshua,
go ahead,
you,
go
you
ahead.
can. If I recall correctly, when the ministers, a previous minister, no Minister Maya, I think in one of the other media shows, said that the chamber was consulted in that issue, and we were not. There's also always room for increased membership in any organization that you have. The fact, however, is that they said that they consulted a group of retailers.
Right, I think that's what
That's
was
what they
said.
said.
That's
That
what
they consulted
Minister
a
of
group
Security.
of
Yes.
And that they
retailers
were
and
going to
wholesalers.
invite importers
Yes,
to another follow-up meeting.
right.
But that invitation, at least to my knowledge, did not come. Bro. So I'm not sure how to read what he said. No.
So what's the importance of being consulted in terms of the BCCI being a part of these consultations? Let's talk about the importance of that based on the community that you represent.
Well, and I think that might have been a good place to start, because the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry is the oldest and the largest business support organization in the country. We represent, I think the last figures, approximately 6,000 individual employers. And we represent all sectors of society, mainly in the services industry and the commerce sector. A large portion of our membership are MSMEs, of which an even more significant percentage of those MSMEs are women-owned MSMEs. So I think that in any public policy consultation or any public policy initiative in general where that would affect the private sector, it would almost be natural that you consult the largest representative body in that sector.
Yeah.
Now, have you guys gotten a chance to take a look at the proposal to see what products are being added to the list? And would you be able to expand and speak a bit on what it looks like?
We have taken a look at the list, and it is not a list of products, it's a list of categories.
Right.
Categories.
So when you expand that 30 items in the food items, and you add the 13 other non-food items, you are looking at over 1,000 different products.
Okay.
So it's not 30.
Yeah.
No, it's far-reaching than 30. And then that's where it becomes even more difficult to police. How
So
can you do that?
Currently, where does it stand in terms of the amount of products before the proposal?
The price control list, as we currently understand it, that currently exists in legislation, because for anybody who doesn't know, that there are price controls for certain goods. Those price controls have originated, I think, as early as 1987 and contain goods that are like the basic food items. I think sugar, things like beans are a part of that list. As a specific number, I can't recall
It's
exactly.
9, I believe, I think.
9? Yeah.
So nine categories are products right now.
Well, I think they identify it as not individual SKUs, but like commodities, for example, like beans and sugar.
All right, and that is, they're looking to expand that. Now, we also heard from the Prime Minister of recent, and he's saying that they can't consult everybody. That's basically his truth. They can't consult everybody as much as they've wanted to, and that at the end of the day, there needs to be a solution. And they have to find a solution to this growing issue. Would you agree?
I think that's where we agree the most, and I think that's why we opened up the conversation by saying that the government of Belize and the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry are in total agreement that inflation is an issue and solutions need to be provided. The point of difference, I wouldn't even say disagreement totally, but the point of difference is really the tools or the solutions that are being proposed. What we're saying in its most simplest terms is that we want to be a part of the conversation in finding a solution, especially if it involves the private sector, and any solution to giving relief to lower income households, I think naturally must involve the private sector. We want to be a part of that conversation so we can arrive at a more sustainable solution.
What's at the end of the day your proposal?
Well, we propose in the letter and in every other media engagement that we have, that we want to be included in the table. We think that we can make positive contributions to the conversation, but also we want to see how the government and the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry can collaborate more in developing schemes for targeted assistance. And it's not anything that is not new to the government either. The government has, I think, done well when they used to do it with the grocery bag initiative, for example. That's an example of targeted assistance, where you identify people that need a certain goods, and then you give the relief to them. That way, you give direct assistance to the beneficiary. And we think that that's an area where both the Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the government can collaborate further to possibly expand, see how we can make it better so that, again, the people that need the assistance the most get that assistance.
So this would work in a sense where the grocers, for example, they would know who these individuals are, and would be able to strategically provide this sort of relief to those individuals, right? The question is, though, because while on one end we're speaking on low income earners or that low income bracket, I think everybody is feeling the pinch.
Of course.
I mean, you're middle income,
right.
You're feeling the pinch because your middle income level of finance isn't what it is anymore. I imagine that high income earners are also feeling the pinch, and so doing something like this spreads the solution across the board versus a targeted approach.
Well, I think that it wouldn't even, you see, it might spread it across the board a little bit where, like you said, maybe middle income, higher income might be able to benefit from something like a price control, but you're disproportionately impacting the lower income as well, because one of the undesired effects that come out of price control is that you sometimes end up in a shortage of goods. Whereas if there is a price control on a particular good, people who can afford it will realize and will start to consume a bit differently. Maybe instead of picking up one of a particular good, they buy two now. Whereas the lower income household who was already struggling to buy one of that item is finding that the goods aren't on the shelves as much anymore.
And they might have to go to the more pricier option.
Different things could happen. But the point is that it tends to disproportionately affect lower income households. And that's the group of people that I think we all agree need the help, really. Because people like us, we're feeling the pinch, of course. But at least we're able to meet our daily necessities day by day. There are people in this country who don't, And just like the government, we recognize that those are the people that we need to target that assistance to.
Inflation does not discriminate, right? It affects us all.
Right.
It's just that the impact that it has on certain sectors of society are bigger than others, no? So if you were to look at the grocery bag program that was had during COVID, I mean, the data might be there. We are not proposing to reinvent the wheel. Right, the data is already there. We know who may be those that need the assistance more. Let's go to them. Provide it directly to them.
And we're also saying too that because people tend to blame the government a lot for inflation, and I would be the first to say that the government isn't entirely responsible for inflation and the rising cost of goods. There are a lot of extraneous factors that are contributing to inflation, but the government doesn't have to find these solutions on its own. With any policy initiative, you have civil society organizations that are there, that do the research, that know the constituents of people that they represent, and that can help the government in arriving at these sustainable policy decisions.
One of the issues with the targeted assistance is the regulating of that. So such a program. Oftentimes, programs like these are abused, even by those who who may not necessarily need that type of assistance. You find that people end up on the list and they don't need the assistance. So one could argue that regardless of the approach, there will be disadvantages among a population or among a group or among a society.
I don't think you're entirely wrong, but you have to compare the two options at hand and see which one has less disadvantages. And in our analysis, when we look at both the price control and the targeted assistance, granted both of them might have their disadvantages, but the price control, the disadvantages that tend to come with price controls, I think far outweigh those that can be faced with targeted assistance.
So we saw that Minister Henry Charles Usher was actually in agreement that the Belize Chamber of Commerce should have been consulted in this process. Now that we have established that indeed you guys could have played a part in this process dealing with inflation, what's next? What would you like to see done next?
Well, I would say that we could still play a part in it because I haven't seen any legislation passed expanding the list. I think this is still a live policy issue. There is still room for discussion. Nothing is in writing yet as far as we understand or what we've seen. So we are ready, we're open, and we're encouraging the government for us to have a sit down. Let's have a chat. Let's see how we can flesh out different ideas, again, to arrive at a more workable, sustainable solution that benefits the people that it's intended to benefit.
I guess indirectly we have influenced what is happening. I mean, we have met with some government people, and I am assuming that they are looking at our proposals very carefully, and hopefully they will be able to extract some of the ideas that we have in that proposal and make it a part of the whole solution. I think at the end of the day, what we are saying is that we want to become a part of the solution.
Right.
We want to help. I mean, as Joshua rightly mentioned, the government, you should work together in conjunction with the largest private organization in Belize. I mean, we are not saying anything that's not reasonable.
Yeah.
How do you guys respond to the criticism then that there is this perceived pushback from the chamber or members within the chamber because at the end of the day, a proposal like this affects your bottom line. At the end of the day, a proposal like this affects your profit margins or the profit margins of those within the private sector whom you represent. And so while it is that there is an interest for better prices for the low-income earners, there's also a personal interest for your profit margins and your bottom line.
Well, let's look beyond the profit margins, right? And we are in business to make money, to create profits. Obviously, you have to have a conscience as well, and everything has a limit. But if you cap businesses, if the ability to earn, then it also has an effect on the entire population, because a lot of these businesses contribute to the development of our society, be it through donations to charitable organizations, you can name it. Employment. I work for one of the largest importers in Belize, and I can tell you that the amount of letters requesting assistance that we go through on a monthly basis is a lot. I mean, we cannot satisfy everyone, but we do our best. But no, if you are telling me, well, your ability to earn is being capped, then as a business, what do? You have to relook at, what you're giving back, because you might not be able to afford it.
Yeah.
And when you look at an expansion of the price control list to include hundreds of products, definitely that will have an effect on your profit margins,
correct,
especially with a ceiling of 15%, correct?
It's been said that list, which is about 1,000, it for some businesses represent about 20% of your revenues. You know, so we're talking about something substantial.
Yeah.
So do you think that if that list is established and approved, that we could see further business closing down, like Bottom Dollar?
You know, it's difficult to say, and I wouldn't want to speculate, but for businesses in general over the past few years, even before COVID coming up until now, with the pandemic and different geopolitical issues, supply chain shortages, it's been a tough few years for businesses. Somehow businesses are finding a way to hang on, and from what we've heard anecdotally from coming from our members, it's not easy. It's not easy. We would hope that businesses don't have to close down, but we're not ruling it out as a possibility that some businesses might have to come to at some point.
I think, though, what we still haven't found, or still haven't identified, is an effective solution for price gouging. We see it taking place across the country still to date. And on social media, if you're a social media user, you see the complaints as well, and people actually posting evidence and images of one product being at a certain cost last week, and that cost almost increasing by 25-30% the following week or a couple weeks after. It's a real issue, and that, I would imagine, should be also a part of the conversation in terms of solution, because if we're talking about targeted assistance, it does something, yes, for a targeted group, but the issue of price gouging remains, and one would imagine that putting a ceiling on certain products does something to help with that issue of price gouging, because once you go over that price now, then you're clearly price gouging and you could be penalized for that. So where does the conversation go when it comes to the issue of price gouging?
There are a couple of things there. No. One is policing. Will you be able to police this? Right, which I believe, at least from our assessment, it's going to be extremely challenging to be policing. I think, if not mistaken, in Belize we have about over 3,000 point of sales, meaning stores, and so throughout the country. So it's going to be extremely difficult to do that. The other aspect that you brought up is, and I know that it's a very popular term now, that in Belize we import inflation, right? So, and depending on the type of product, your turns, your inventory turns might be faster than other products. So you might be seeing the X brand prices raising, faster than a slower moving brand. That's something that we have to consider as well, right? We have, and as I said before, I work for one of the largest importers in Belize. Prices increases, advices from our suppliers coming in right, left, and center.
Really?
So what are we to do? One of the things that we do when that happens is you rationalize what you import in, because there might be some products that the price increases being proposed are so high that you will not be able to sell that product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it also speaks to the reality of business owners in some senses, because we tend to look at businesses and think, well, they're doing well, they're making money, they should be able to afford anything that we give them. It's just not the case. Even when we talk about the landed cost of the goods that they do sell, those aren't the only costs associated with doing businesses. There's also the taxes that they have to pay to even keep their doors open, trade license that they have to pay, the recent increase in the cost of labor that has gone up for most of these businesses, the price of fuel that has been going up. So there are a lot of aspects in the business environment that contributes to the final cost of the good on the shelf. So I can understand that it's easy for consumers to look at goods on the shelf going up week by week and think, well, clearly the business is quote unquote price gouging. But where does legitimate increases in prices end and price gouging begins?
So
it's that definition that I think we still haven't been able to ascertain yet. People are using the term price gouging, but is it really price gouging?
So is there data out there on the importer's end in terms of data available in terms of what's the cost of at what cost are you bringing in these goods, and what's the relationship like with the importer and the wholesaler, and I know some importers are wholesalers as well, and the retailer. What's the relationship like there when it comes to the chain in terms of conversations that are had on prices? And is there any conversation that is had on prices on goods outside of the price control list?
Yeah. Well, in a free economy, the market set prices. Right. So if Joshua is importing a product and I am importing a very similar product, and I price it higher than Joshua's one, it might be that Joshua's product sell more than mine. So what that does is that it forces me to try to match or come as close as possible to Joshua's product. No? So the market in a free economy set prices, right? Now, when it comes to importing, there are costs that are elements that make your landed cost, right? Whatever that is, then you as a business, depending on what your expense profile is, you arrive at a percentage margin or markup, depending on what your business uses, to arrive at what you should earn at least to clear your expenses. And then you look at what profit you should be making, no? Net profit. And then based on that, then you sell it, and then the wholesaler does the same when he or she sells to the retailer, and the retailer does the same. You know, so it's a chain, and it compounds at the end of the day. You know? So some people might take lesser margins or markups, some other might do. Depends on your business structure.
Yeah.
And I agree with Mr. Pot that the issue remains in terms of where does a reasonable price markup begin and end, and where does price gouging begin, right? How is there any way that we can ascertain that type of information, or we can come to a conclusive solution?
Well, even on the use of the term price gouging, when you do research and you see how price gouging is used in different countries, it's typically reserved for moments of emergency where, like if there's a hurricane, for example, and I think one of the biggest case studies is in New Orleans for Katrina, when there's a hurricane and there was a run on things like zinc and on plywood, and the suppliers were putting up the prices on that. The state government had to come in and regulate the prices. So it's times of emergencies like that the term price gouging has been reserved for. What we're experiencing here, where there is a lot of legitimate price increases because of a myriad of factors impacting the final cost of or final price of goods on the shelves, it's very difficult to use the term price gouging, you know, and it would require a specific definition that I think has not been ascertained.
I mean, that's not to say that there aren't businesses out there taking advantage of the fact that we are living in a time where inflation is at a high.
Yeah, and there are also businesses who are not only taking advantage of consumers, but they are also not paying the right share of taxes to the government.
That's the other thing too.
Let's move the conversation over to another press release that you guys put out, this time to the Minister Michelle Shabat that deals directly with energy. And your concerns were that of where Belize is as it relates to energy and electricity. Perhaps we can dive a little bit into that and the reason for putting out that release.
Well, I think being the largest private sector organization in the country, we are an important stakeholder in I think, energy policy. Because at least where commercial enterprises are concerned, energy tends to be one of the higher cost elements. And in order to expand or to continue to grow industry and manufacturing and all of that, we have to start to look at more innovative ways to get energy, you know, to bring it down to a price that industry, I think, can use to continue growing.
Isn't there an agreement with BEL for businesses that produce on a large scale? Like you pay based on your operations?
Schemes like that do exist, but I think when you talk to people in the industry sector, they will tell you that they are still the prices tend to be still a bit prohibitive in some cases, and that's why we haven't seen the introduction of like meat processing facilities on a larger scale, and that's why we still continue to export a lot of our commodities, because because when you get into the manufacturing, one of the factors, not the largest or the only factor, but one of the factors you have to consider is the energy cost that you will be incurring.
Right.
You know, does
Because
it
of the
justify?
use.
Because of the use, because of the scale,
Yeah.
and the prices of energy here compared to other economies where manufacturing is a bit larger.
I mean, there's an argument that the cost of energy in Belize is low compared to many nations in Central America, some nations in Europe, and some states in the Americas as well.
Yeah, and of course, all of that needs to be considered. But even in those countries where energy might be higher, you have to look at whether or not the government is subsidizing, how well it's subsidizing manufacturing. When we have these economic conversations, it's really not as clear cut as it might seem sometimes. We think about one thing, but we're ignoring a lot of different factors that come along the side. But I know we wanted to dip into the energy, our comments on the energy policy a little bit, but I just wanted to wrap up the conversation on the price control, which is what we were here predominantly for, to say that there is space for the government of Belize, the private sector, through the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to find a solution, to the issues that sectors of society here in Belize are facing with inflation. And we're open to do that. It's not a situation where the government is on one side of the table and we're totally on the other side. We're both in agreement on the fundamental issue that we need to tackle inflation. It's just a matter of identifying what is the best workable tool. And I think the title for a World Bank 2020 paper on price control, the title for that paper was, price controls, good intentions, bad outcomes. We tend to jump into policies like this with the best of intentions, and we don't doubt that. But it's the outcomes that we have to start to plan for a little bit. And we don't think, through our research and analysis, that the outcomes for price controls in this scenario, in these circumstances, will bring about the desired outcomes. We believe that quite the opposite might occur. We want to avoid that, so we're ready to work with the government to find a more sustainable option.
Have we seen that since the announcement in the House that there is more openness on the government's part to have this conversation? I know the Prime Minister only commented last week, Friday, when he was asked by reporters. But has there been more openness now from the government to have that conversation, or at least representatives?
We've reached out. We've reached out to them. We are proactive in our approach, and we reach out to the government, to offer our assistance if needed. No?
Yeah. But at the end of the day, if it passes and you weren't consulted, is it something where you just throw your hands in the air and say, let's see what happens?
I think as a civil society organization, those are always the issues that you face, because we're really there to help guide policy decisions. So when policies are made contrary to the advice of maybe the relevant civil society organization, then unfortunately you just have to move on to the next issue.
All right, well, gentlemen, we are out of time. I'll use this opportunity to ask if you have any last words you'd like to share.
Apart from the gratitude extended to both of you and to Channel 5 for inviting us to have this conversation here, we hope that our members are tuned in. And as a word to our members, we continue to work on the issue. We're trying to engage with the government as best as possible to get a seat at the table and help to shape this policy decision. And we look forward to being able to update everybody, and in particular our members, on the developments on this issue.
You couldn't say it better, Joshua. Thank you guys for having us.
Thank you so much for coming as well. We appreciate your attendance this morning. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by representatives of the Jazz Fest to talk about what you can expect for 2023 Jazz Festival. Don't go away.